Hello. Last week I was presenting at the CIPS, that's the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supplies, branch event in Derbyshire in the UK on the subject of supplier relationship management and the skills required to make it a success. And my proposition was and is that we have a chronic skills gap, a chronic skills deficiency within SRM. Now, I'm not alone in this thinking because in the Deloitte CPO survey of 2018, 51% of procurement leaders believe that their teams lack the capabilities to deliver on their procurement strategies. Now, we know in procurement that supplier relationship management is but the post-contract element of the category management process. And we also know from experiences that much of the focus of procurement organizations is on about securing the best deals through the application of sourcing methodologies. But the necessary day-to-day activity of managing supplier performance and creating incremental value is an area that is kind of blows hot and cold. Some organizations stay with it in a very sustained way, but there's others who, when business is tight, they tend to use much more around competitive leverage to try and get the best deals or at least deliver on their cost saving targets for their organization. So I boiled down the skills required into three competency sets. The first competency set is around strategic competence. The second is analytical competence, and the third, engagement competence. And let's talk about each one of those in turn. The first area of competence is strategic competence. And within strategic competence, we're talking about leadership here. We're talking about the ability of the practitioner to lead the organization, including key stakeholders, in getting involved in developing relationship-specific strategies for key suppliers where there's significant dependency on the part of the procuring organization. So the ability to develop those strategies that will kind of guide what the organization is going to do in terms of its engagement with those suppliers over the longer term. But also there's the broader aspect around the SRM program. Stakeholders are maybe not so interested in procurement activities or supplier relationship management, except when it really impacts them. And so we need to somehow find a way of getting them educated and engaged and possibly active in managing key supplier relationships. And to do that, we need a compelling value proposition around SRM. What it is, why we're doing it, what the benefits are likely to accrue from applying it. So we need leadership and change management. The second competency set is around analytical capabilities. You can't really implement SRM with a key supplier unless you know what the state of the relationship is. And so we need people to understand what the particular relationship circumstance that exists at a particular point in time that they have to deal with. And within that, we need to understand that there's a whole suite of analytical tools that mature practitioners will use, but I'll pick out a couple that I think are particularly important. The first one is, well, what is the supplier's own corporate strategy? Are we looking to invest in a long-term relationship, perhaps putting in maybe a 5 or even a longer-term 5-year contract, a longer-term contract, with a supplier that is investing in an area of business that's really important to us? Or is the supplier looking to maybe scale back some of that investment and maybe divest of a division that we are about to become reliant on? So we need to understand what the supplier's corporate strategy is. And related to that, what is their sort of strategy for managing us as a key customer? And, ideally, as a customer, we want to be the customer of choice. We want to be in the supplier. When you look at the supplier's portfolio, we want to be in the core, or at least the developed quadrant of their method. We don't want to be in a position where we're considered an irritant or even commercially exploitable. So we need to understand the dependency and interest and commitment the supplier has to us as a customer before we can really begin to think what's the best way of us leveraging our relationship in order to generate additional value and high performance from the supplier. So there's a whole suite of analytical tools that the procurement practitioner, the SRM practitioner, needs to be familiar with and competent in facilitating their use with key stakeholders within SRM teams. The third competency area is engagement competence. And this is what most people think of as supplier relationship management. And this is the day-to-day engagement with key suppliers. And within that, I've distilled it down into 3 key value levers, because it is all about how do we get value. The first one is about protecting value. And this is all about how do we get what we contract for. And within that, we need people who are competent at managing performance reviews, managing contracts, and managing risk. The goal here is to minimize value leakage and ensure that we get, as I've suggested, what we set out in the contract at the beginning. Building on the protection of value, we're then looking to develop value. And this is where we need perhaps some additional expertise around how do we create incremental value from the relationship through the deployment of what manufacturing organizations often call supplier development activity. And this is essentially about our ability to be able to help the supplier improve their method of operation, the delivery of their products or their services in such a way that it can remove waste and release more value potentially to us. And this is where kind of people talk about lean. It's been around for a very long time, but within the lean toolkit, there are many methods that expert practitioners can use to uncover where that additional value might reside and then how to get your hands on it as the buying organization. And the third value lever is around value transformation. And value transformation is really around the notion of supplier innovation and strategic alliances. Now, it's really important to say here is that we need to make sure we don't get ahead of ourselves. Protecting value through good performance and contract and risk management is absolutely essential. It's the foundation for everything else. And supply development or value development will allow you to generate that incremental value. But we're looking for breakthroughs here when we're talking about transformation. And this is where we're looking to work with the best, most capable suppliers that have got significant technological advantages perhaps. They've got research and development activities that complement ours. And so we can begin to work with them in a way that allows us to tap into their innovation potential for the benefit of us and our own customers downstream. And then we're into potentially strategic alliances. And this is where in some perhaps exceptional circumstances, our organization is to be prepared to make some significant relationship-specific investments that might result in a joint venture, but that potentially could be a real success for both organizations. So, and that is for the most advanced SRM and procurement organizations. So that was the nature of the talk. It's essentially around we've got a chronic skills shortage. And that there are 3 essential competency areas: strategic competence, analytical competence, and then engagement competence. And the question I pose to the group, and the question maybe you can think about, is how good are you in your organization today in establishing those competences and making sure that the organization is capable? But also, how good do you want to be?